goes at the soup store! Fuck you!
See, regardless of the draft,
Welcome back to Wish for Death Island Population Me. Today we're diving back into Harry Potter and we're on to the time travel one. I also like to call this one Malfoy is a tsundere, you'll see why. So let's start the book and skip the small talk, shall we? It opens with a general recap of the Dursleys being idiots and Harry is still living with them, surprisingly, and how they're locking his magic shit away during the summer in the cupboard under the stairs. For another, Harry really wanted to do his homework but was forced to do it in secret in the dead of night. Knowing the Dursleys, I'm surprised that they're not waking up with the sound of a quill, because a car rammed into their house and they didn't wake up, but then the owl made a noise and they were like, real shit. Anyway, he is doing so right now. His homework is covering a book about some Salem witch shit, and there's a really weird person called Gwendolyn the Weird he has to write his essay on. It's annoying as well because in the movie he uses Lumos when magic isn't allowed outside of Hogwarts, so I don't know how he's allowed to do that, but also, is there a nuance between having to practice a spell outside of school time and using it unauthorized? Like, if you have to practice a spell outside of school, are you allowed to do that? Is the government like, no, that's fine, they're just practicing, and then if you do a different spell that you're not allowed to use, then they're like, oh my god, you can't do that. Also, there's other situations, like let's say self-defense, are there nuances for that? Or like, if there's like a priceless heirloom that's dropping because someone was trying to move your shit to a different house, and they dropped it because moving vans, could you use some spell to save it? Because I think that counts as a pretty serious situation, or like if your baby's fallen out the window or something, you know what I mean. Is there a nuance where they're like, oh no, that's fine, that was an emergency? Either way, I think that the movie kind of fucked up with this, but they wanted a cool opening shot, so I get it. But the essay is just straight up weird. It gives us some lore that, of course, I'm going to complain about. Non-magic people, more commonly known as muggles, were particularly afraid of magic in medieval times, but not very good at recognizing it. On the rare occasion that they did catch a real witch or wizard, burning had no effect whatsoever. The witch or wizard would perform a basic flame freezing charm and then pretend to shriek with pain while enjoying a gentle tickling sensation. Indeed, Gwendolyn the Weird enjoyed being burned so much that she allowed herself to be caught no less than 47 times in various disguises. So they burned the witches and wizards and that was fine, but they burned other people to death, and I guess that's a happy, quirky fact in history books. And I find it hard to believe that they had all of this shit going on and then real magic was still a thing. Like, in real life we had those trials and then I guess people got a little bit more reasonable over time because we realized that magic isn't fucking real. But in this universe, since magic is real and people are really sloppy with it, they'd have so many instances of actual proof of this happening. And even then, even though magic isn't real in real life, there's still people who go on about like weird demon magic or whatever because of conspiracy theories, and then use footage of normal glitches and whatnot and claiming that it's some sort of supernatural thing. So why wouldn't there be a really strong conspiracy presence around magic? Because there would be muggles who would definitely be a bit more observant, and even if that was swept under the rug as some sort of conspiracy that didn't have any merit, there would still be a lot of it, I think. I mean, there's like whole TV shows and newscasters and mainstream media, and everybody has some sort of weird opinion that they stick to and it gets broadcasted everywhere. Yet I don't really see a lot of that in the Harry Potter universe. It's like wizards are fucking stupid, but muggles are just like brain damaged or something to not be able to see any of this. And it doesn't seem like it's magic, because I guess there could be a spell that could suddenly make it so that muggles have fucking selective memory or whatever, but still. Slowly and very carefully, he unscrewed the ink bottle, dipped his quill into it, and began to write, pausing every now and again to listen, because if any of the Dursleys heard the scramble of his quill on the way to the bathroom, he'd probably find himself locked in the cupboard under the stairs for the rest of the summer. That is one entire sentence. My lord. What is proofreading? Harry's only living relatives, they were muggles, and they had a very medieval attitude towards magic, as opposed to wizards who have a very medieval attitude towards everything. So it goes on with some more exposition. For years, Petunia and Uncle Vernon hoped if they kept Harry as downtrodden as possible, they would be able to squash the magic out of him. I understand that they have some sort of broken logic because they don't actually know what the fuck they're doing, but still, it doesn't really seem to make any sense. I mean, and they've also shown a lot of times that they kind of want to abandon him in different places. Like, they'll go to the train station in the first book and then they don't see anyone there to pick him up to go to magic school, and they're like, have fun, and then they drive off and just leave him there as an 11-year-old in the train station all alone. And then if they actually were doing that just to freak him out and then come back later, wouldn't they be freaking out everywhere and being like, where the fuck did he go, and looking for this child who just disappeared and wasn't there when they got back? They wouldn't just assume that the wizards took him or whatever. They were under the assumption that the shit didn't exist even when they were showed that it did. I was surprised that when Harry came back or sent them a letter, they weren't like, where the fuck have you been, and made this big deal about it. Because the entire thing with the Dursleys, I know I comment a lot about them being like, it's like, why aren't they just giving Harry away if they don't want to deal with him or whatever? If you think about it, they do want to make sure that they keep him in check so that he doesn't cause a scene for them, but him going missing because they just let him wander off is something that's going to cause a scene for them. So they have so many opportunities to just be like, let's give him over to the wizards so that they can kind of cover it up and just say that he went to live with relatives, and then it would just be fine if that happened. But if they did something so careless as just let him get lost in the muggle world, that's going to cause a whole lot of trouble. But alas, once again, I'm getting ahead of myself. The most they could do, however, was to lock away Harry's spellbooks, wand, cauldron, and broomstick at the start of summer break, and forbid him to talk to the neighbours. So he picks the lock also to get his stuff, which I'm surprised he didn't do earlier, but Fred and George apparently taught him how to do that. But I also have a thought, if they didn't teach him how to do that, how would he get to his homework? For example, there's probably a lot of abusive households, and in real life as well, there's a lot of kids from abusive households who just have to show up to school. And like in real life, a lot of schools just kind of ignore this because they don't do their jobs. But this is a magic school. They have the ability to know these things, as has been proven multiple times. So let's say Harry couldn't get his basic supplies. How would they do that for him? Would they have to send like a wizard over to be like, hey, can you let this kid get his homework out so he can actually do it or something? How would they interfere with that? Because they seem very selective about what to interfere with, even though they apparently know everything. I guess it's fortunate Harry can just do this stuff himself, though we don't have to answer that question. Harry had crept downstairs, picked the lock on the cupboard under the stairs, grabbed some of his books and hidden them in his room. Which, again, I have a gripe with the movie. In the book, he hides that stuff, which I understand, but in the movies, he just blatantly has this shit plastered all over his walls, and his relatives just don't give a fuck. One time, Harry got a call from Ron, because in the last book, he mentioned that he would teach Ron how to use the telephone or something, and this idiot doesn't know how to use phones, despite it seeming to be something more efficient than a lot of the stuff that wizards use. Honestly, his dad should also understand these things because he works in the department for understanding these things. So Ron starts ringing down the phone at Harry, but Harry's not the one who answered, it's Mr. Dursley, of course. Wizards cannot possibly be so retarded that they don't understand phones. So Uncle Vernon's like, oh my god, how dare you, blah, blah, blah. What did Harry think was going to happen when he gives out his home phone number? Like, motherfucker doesn't have any sense of self-preservation. Obviously, he's not gonna know who answers it, and if he's not the one who usually answers it, then his friends might run into Vernon, and then he's gonna chew him out and chew the friend out. Like, how fucking stupid do you have to be like, no, this is gonna be fine. So after that, Vernon was like, if any of your fucking friends call again, this is not going to work out, and then Ron finally gets the hint and doesn't call afterwards. So Harry had no word from any of his wizarding friends for 5 long weeks. Luckily, the owl isn't dying this time because it actually got let out. There was one very small improvement. After swearing that he wouldn't use her to send letters to any of his friends, Harry had been allowed to send his owl Hedwig out at night. So yes, he promises not to send any letters, but how would Vernon even know this? Vernon would be either asleep at night or wouldn't be monitoring Harry's window at night, because it's not like the situation in the second one where they keep him locked up. They just try to ignore him now, so he could easily just send her with a letter, which he does later, with something around her ankle or something, and then she could send letters back and forth. This wouldn't change the situation at all. So it goes on to explain more about Harry being special and all that, defeating Voldemort by just existing because Voldemort is allergic to British infants. Yet another unusual thing about Harry was how little he looked forward to his birthdays. Harry, that doesn't make you special. I think a lot of people don't give a shit about their birthday. So on the current night, he's kind of chilling and his owl is still gone. Hedwig had been absent for 2 nights now. Harry wasn't worried about her. She'd been gone long before. And yet, letters don't occur to you, bud. Silhouetted against the golden moon and growing larger every moment was a large, strangely lopsided creature, and it was flapping in Harry's direction. What? Through the window soared 3 owls, 2 of them holding up a third, which appeared to be unconscious. Wait, so this is another question that I've had since the beginning of the series. When it comes to owls, there's obviously a big distinction between a normal owl and some sort of magical owl, because the magical owl seems to understand how to deliver these letters, and birds being used to carry packages is nothing new. I mean, there were pigeons used for that kind of thing. I understand that. But the problem, of course, is when you bring magic into the mix. Like, what if a bird didn't make it to its destination? Like, let's say during a war, somebody sends a pigeon across, the pigeon gets shot, you won't get the letter. Or like the enemy intercepts it. That's something that we've heard about. Yet in this one, it always seems to be like the owls just find their destination, even the ones that are clearly medically complicated or like dying, like the Weasley's owl. What happens if the owl just falls down? Like in this instance, it did collapse, but Hedwig and some other owl were there to pick it up. Were they just magically there? Like, did they know and they were like, we have to cross paths because Errol is going to collapse or whatever? If not, Ron just wouldn't have given Harry the letter at all because he wouldn't know what happened to that owl. Are they like medical support owls or something? Is there like an easier way to... See, this is why magic is still inferior, because emails are a thing, and like even the postman is more reliable than an owl, honestly. Like, it might take a little bit longer, and like I know how Owl's post is not the most reliable. It seems more reliable than an owl. So there's probably like some sort of regulation regarding the owls, so I wonder if somebody has tried to like mail cocaine to someone else and then they get caught by the wizard customs or something. Like there's like border patrol, but it's wizards. I want to see like the cocaine dealer who has magic powers. Anyway, he gets a letter from Ron, who is in Egypt because his family won a trip there. It's amazing here in Egypt. Bill's taken us around all the tombs, and you wouldn't believe the curses those old Egyptian wizards used on them. Every single natural mystery was wizards. That's kind of boring. This is actually an example of what I was saying before. You have a bunch of evidence, like a bunch of curses and stuff. Surely there'd be a lot more conspiracy theories, because every single human mystery is apparently wizards now. It just seems like there'd be a lot more evidence for a lot more of like a split ideology or series of ideologies forming among the muggles to deal with this kind of stuff. Anyway, Ron gives Harry a sneaker scope. If there's someone untrustworthy around, it's supposed to light up and spin, so in my eyes it's just as useless as a remembrall because it gives you an idea that something's going on, but you don't know what it is or where it is or what you're supposed to do about it. It's fucking useless. If there's someone around you who knows that you think that they're suspicious and then your sneaker scope thing starts going off, they're gonna know and like instigate something with you because they realize that you realize. It's kind of inefficient. Also, there's a bunch of shit like this where they're apparently gimmicks, like they're, you know, you can get like gimmick tarot cards and stuff like that in real life, even though like I personally don't really believe in that kind of thing, but there are some people who swear by it, and there's not really a lot of concrete proof. It's like the paranormal, there's not a lot of concrete proof, and even I've had a weird experience when I went on a ghost tour, but I still don't believe in ghosts. It was just like a really weird, unexplainable thing that I felt. With that being said, I understand the basis for why there would be gimmick toys, but again, there's overwhelming evidence for why certain things like this would be very useful, or at least be like confirmed to be legit. So how could you, like, I'm surprised that they're not used more, because it seems like with magic there's a whole lot of different ways to prove that something's legit, yet they're still treated like gimmicks. I don't know. Also, Harry's just really into adverbs, isn't he? He looked at it happily for a few seconds and picked up the parcel Hedwig had brought. I love adverbs that add nothing and decrease the quality of the sentence. Hermione's in France and wanted to send Harry something, and Hedwig just magically turned up at that time and was like, yo, give it to me. So she also has a concern about it opening at customs as well. So there is a wizard customs, or at least a muggle customs, but then how would the muggle customs know about the owl flying around? So there has to be a wizard customs, right? So is there like a wizard drug trafficking thing through owls? Can someone send like cocaine through flu powder across the fireplace, and then as they're going past they can like drop it into the fireplace that they're going past, and then they can come out on another side? It seems like drug trafficking would be super easy in the wizard world. So the other one is from Hagrid and was sent from the official school owl. It seems like he had taken the school owl that had the letter for the enrollments on it and then attached his own thing to it, and he sent a creepy book that is alive. That makes sense. I'm picturing that one thing from Doctor Who, you know what I'm talking about. It's like, imagine her for every single page. If teachers can use those owls as their own personal owls as well, do you think like wizards ever order like sus things? Like, does McGonagall ever order like a mysterious package anonymously and then just take it away with her, and they're like, what you got there? You know that someone ordered something suspicious, stuck it up his ass, and then like transfigured it into an animal, and then it tore out his asshole and died. You know some fucking degenerate legend did that, and that's how he died. And then someone put that shit on a wizard card. If wizard cards were real, I would own that one. Proudly. You'd see it the first time that you walk into my house. You'd just see it lying there or like framed on the wall, and it's like, I dare you to take a step closer into my fucking house, motherfucker. Okay, so Hagrid knows that Harry lives a very volatile life and a very volatile environment, so giving Harry a sentient book is probably a bit of a risky move, don't you think? So the book toppled off the bed with a loud thunk and shuffled rapidly across the room. So how are they supposed to read the book if it's sentient? How does a sentient book even function? Like, there's a lot of gimmick books, and I just can't help but think that it's like the dumbest thing in the world, because school curriculums are really boring. Like, the books look really boring, but the thing is, they kind of have to be boring because them being boring is how most people can kind of understand them. And I don't like the way that schools are structured, so I'm not trying to defend schools, but it's more like there's a certain reason for things, and I think the whole point of telling a fanciful story like this is to be like, let's take that and flip it on its head so it sounds fun to learn magic. And I understand that, but again, there's a fine line between that and just generally something that seems impossible. Having a sentient book doesn't make any sense. Like, if anything, if you're able to create sentient things just magically, which again is a whole nother thing, but let's let that slide for now. If that was the case, why wouldn't you have like a normal book that you could read through, and then part of the school curriculum is you getting that alive thing in tandem with the book, and one of your projects or your exams is to, throughout the school year, make sure that you take care of that book and nurture it so that it doesn't die or something. I don't know. It's like when a school has like a pet hamster or something, you know what I mean? Why wouldn't that just make more sense? Like, can sentient books even die? There was also a form of permission slip for Hogsmeade, a place that they could go on school trips during the school year. You needed a guardian to sign it as well. But how on earth was he going to persuade Uncle Vernon or Aunt Petunia to sign the form? Why would they even want to? Let's go check on that Stepford Wives family then. They were watching a brand new television, a welcome home or the summer present for Dudley. How rich is this family that they can just get a new TV in the 80s for something as simple as a welcome home from school thing? Also, Dudley got fatter. He has progressed to 5 whole chins. He's not quite Movie Bob level, but he's getting there. So they're all watching the news, and one of the things now is that there is some super dangerous person, a magical dangerous person at that, on the Muggle news. The public is warned that Black is armed and extremely dangerous. A special hotline has been set up, and any sightings of Black should be reported immediately. So now that the Muggle public know that Sirius is bad, I understand that this is a good move. If someone is really that bad, then you want to do that, and I understand that, but do they do this for every single magic serial killer? And if there's a Muggle serial killer, do they do that for the wizard community, or does the wizard community just not expect to run into them? Because you could have some sort of Muggle serial killer who understands the wizarding world and goes to hide there, so I think you would need to have some sort of broadcasting system. If the Unabomber or Dharma is just walking around in the magical world for whatever reason, or they have like a magical aid, everyone know this? Or automatically because of the way that the magic world apparently works, or would they need to be informed of this? Like, imagine Gary Heidnik, but really, really bad. There should be some sort of wizard serial killers about. Do wizards have the equivalent of like a pedo van, like a culturally significant comparison, like, oh, don't get into the van, Timmy? Do they have like, oh, don't go onto the broomstick, Timmy? Especially with Polyjuice, like you could dress up as someone's mom using Polyjuice and then lure a toddler into like some weird dimension thing. Like Hermione in the 7th book has a magically expanding bag. Would you just have one where you could take a child in there? This is really dark, but seriously, I mean, if you're gonna open the door to that kind of thing, I'm gonna talk about it. So now we also learn that Vernon supports the death penalty. There is such a thing as, I guess, the wizard death penalties. Like, they have the gun spell, which is Avada Kedavra, which is inferior to a gun, but it's a gun spell. There's this whole conversation that you could have about the idea of the death penalty. Like, in some instances, I can definitely see, let's say, in real life, a muggle prison, I guess, who doesn't have the death penalty because it might be illegal in their area, so then they might decide that the prison is in a certain way that if they just look away from that person one day and then, you know, let a particularly violent inmate be the cellmate of that prisoner, that something bad could happen and that prisoner could be killed. So there's like a kind of indirect way of getting rid of that person, or you could like Epstein them or something. There's a lot of that kind of corruption that could happen. However, when it comes to something like Azkaban, which shouldn't even be real in the first place because it violates human rights unless wizards just don't have human rights. It explains what Dementors are later. It's very clearly something where they're basically dead in all ways but bodily function. Their brains are completely dead because they don't have a soul anymore, which is something that is confirmed to exist in the wizarding world, but no one really gives a shit. For all intents and purposes, this is a death sentence because they will die. Like, it's one of those conversations that you can have where if you erase all memories that someone has and have them start anew, are they really the same person? But this one's even worse because it's like they're a vegetable now, so they basically are dead. Like, there's no starting over. So I wonder if this is like a technicality, like, oh, we don't kill people in the wizarding world, we just set the Dementors on them, they're still technically alive. So it's almost like some sort of dystopian government tactic where they send people away to this wizard prison where everyone either goes mad or they get their soul sucked out, so they're basically dead. It makes me wonder how totalitarian the wizarding world even is, because everyone just accepts Azkaban exists in the same way that they accept house elves being treated like shit, these sentient things being used as slaves. So it's like, how bad is this world that everyone just thinks it's fine? Harry has some interesting morals if he thinks that all of this is fine, even though he's never heard of it before. Like, this wizarding world is either a dystopia or the CCP, which is basically the same thing. There has to be true crime that you can talk about. Like, I want to watch Wizard Bailey Sarian talk about Wizard Gypsy Rose Blanchard while doing wizard makeup, god damn it.
Life sucks!
Harry gets told that his dreadful and abusive Aunt Marge is coming for a visit in a few days, even though she was not a blood relative of Harry's, whose mother had been Aunt Petunia's sister. Aunt Marge had whacked Harry around the shins with her walking stick to stop him from beating Dudley at musical statues. So she is just a straight up abuser. She's a physical abuser and a mental abuser, an emotional abuser. She straight up abuses this kid, but none of his behavioral traits have shown this. Uncle Vernon tells Harry that because Aunt Marge doesn't know about magic, that he told her that they're sending him to a correctional school for bad kids, insists that he has to play along and that he also has to tell her that he's getting beat every single day. And you'll be sticking to that story, boy, or there'll be trouble, spat Uncle Vernon. With the amount of shenanigans that go on here, you'd expect the entire road to know that Harry's a magic at this point. So Harry bargains and says that he'll only play along with Vernon if Vernon promises to sign the form afterwards, which is a pretty big brain move, but also a pretty risky move, because Vernon could always say that he will sign the form, and then as soon as Harry has done his little acting charade and Aunt Marge leaves, Vernon could just say he's not going to sign the form anymore and just leave it at that. Like, what interest does he have to be honest to Harry whatsoever? So Harry packs up his shit, slowly and sadly, because he loves adverbs that aren't necessary. He also sends Hedwig off to go fuck off for a while so Aunt Marge doesn't abuse the owl too, but he bounds a note to her leg for Ron, which I don't know why he didn't do earlier. And Aunt Marge shows up and she's also very fat and ugly because she's evil. She was very like Uncle Vernon, large, beefy, and purple-faced. She even had a moustache, though not as bushy as his. She also has some fat-ass ugly dog with her that probably needs a talking to. Aunt Petunia sounds like she just wants to step on it. I mean, we get a full sentence showing that she doesn't like animals, which, I mean, show don't tell, please. But also, I mean, she has a horse face and a giraffe neck, so you'd expect her to have more in common with them, but I guess not. Ripper began to growl again as Harry sat down. This directed Aunt Marge's attention to Harry for the first time. If she really doesn't want him there, then why not just ship him off to somewhere else to stay for a while? Like, there used to be that old lady that he used to stay with, and she never got mentioned after the first book in the start of it. Like, is she dead? Where is she? I'm sure that she'd want him to come over so she can talk about her cats again. Because if that's not what's happening, the only thing that I can guess what's happening is that they're directly further abusing this child by having the relative come over, knowing that she wants him to be around so that she can complain about him to his face and just make everything a bad time for him. And if they know that, then they're just as complicit in all of that stuff that's going on. It's kind of a horrible implication, but I don't know if that implication is intended or not. So Aunt Marge goes on a full eugenicist rant and compares Harry's bad blood to dog breeds that won't survive, so they need to be stamped out. And she also approves of him being beaten until he becomes not a shithead, and wants force to be used on him. Yet also says that bad blood will never change, so you have to stamp it out. It sounds like a contradiction. Like, how is he supposed to be beaten until he's a good person when he's never going to be a good person because his bad blood prevents him from doing so? This dude should be so fucked up with what his family puts him through. But he's not. She's so awful. She kept throwing out dark hints about what made Harry such an unsatisfactory person. So Harry gets angry as she talks and he doesn't want to react, so he tries thinking happy thoughts and his magic makes him break things like fucking force powers or something. At the moment, the wine glass that Aunt Marge was holding exploded in her hand. So he has untamed magic, essentially. Wasn't the point of getting a wand so that the untamed magic would go away so it could be channeled into the wand? Why? What does it say about him that he still has untamed magic? Is this something that all kids have and then it just slowly goes away? Aunt Marge keeps talking about dogs and bad blood. Ratty little thing it was. Weak. Underbred. Imagine facing this your entire childhood and not coming out fucked up. She also makes fun of Harry's parents dying because, yes, she's that kind of person, I guess. And she also uses a parentheses. So Harry gets mad as fuck and rees at her, and then she starts inflating like the degenerate DeviantArt illustration. Somehow her body is not bursting, like when you overinflate a frog or something. That's not happening to her. She's just floating for some reason. I wonder how much excruciating pain that would entail. Aunt Marge's body began to rise off of her chair towards the ceiling. Harry continues to do angry magic too, as if he's a poltergeist. The cupboard door magically burst open as he reached it. Aunt Marge floats off and Harry gets yelled at, and Vernon destroys the permission slip. So Harry goes on to pack his shit in his room and just runs out the door and thinks of his next move while he sits on the sidewalk. He sat quite still, anger still surging through him, listening to the frantic thumping of his heart, but after 10 minutes alone in the dark street, a new emotion overtook him. Panic. Understandable, but a terrible sentence. He was surprised the Ministry of Magic representatives went swooping down on him where he sat. I'm surprised too. You'd think that they'd do that immediately since they seem to do that every other time. You'd think that a misuse of magic owl would immediately find him where he sat and drop the letter. But alas, that does not happen. So Harry decides to become an outcast, and there's more terrible parentheses, but also a very, very bad sentence shoved into the parentheses, so it's even worse. What if he bewitched his trunk to make it featherlight, tied it to his broomstick, covered himself in the invisibility cloak, and flew to London? So he does know how to do that shit, but still struggles with basic third-year magic. What is the power scale in this universe? I mean, I'm sure that doing some random spell that a third year could learn would not be as impressive as making the weight of something much different. I wish that the series had continued with him living as an outcast though, because it just seems much more entertaining with the idea of him trying to get into like the black market or something as a magic person. He looks ahead and sees a fucking dog, saw quite distinctly a hulking outline of something very big with wide gleaming eyes. So this is how we get introduced to a new concept. Harry throws out his wand as he falls and sees something instantly zoom towards him. It's a bus, the night bus. So this bus appears when you're a wizard in distress who flags them down. Thing is, I'm sure wizards have done what Harry has done before and tripped, yet they might not want the bus. So how does the bus know when its wand flag thing is activated? What if two wizards flag the bus at the same time in different areas? Are there more than one bus? Because the bus is all across the country. Bert and Ernie, I mean Stan and Ern, notice something on Harry's forehead when he goes on said bus and asks his name. For once, Harry does the smart thing and lies his ass off. Where are we, Ern? Somewhere in Wales? Like, seriously, how does the bus actually work? How did they go so far so quickly? And there surely should be more than one, because otherwise there's gonna be some weird time fuckery and like clones of them going around to different wizards. Harry asks how muggles don't see the bus, and Stan replies, "Don't listen properly, do they? Don't look properly either. Never notice nothing, they don't. Muggles are inferior, yet we're the ones with the guns." He shares a newspaper with Harry about Sirius Black because he's so dangerous the muggles have to know. "We are doing all we can to recapture Black," said the Minister for Magic, Cornelius Fudge, this morning, "and we beg the magical community to remain calm. Can you guys not teleport and find him immediately? Like, there are ways for you guys to just know where someone is at any given time, so I assume that you have some sort of marker or tracker or like GPS placed upon all of the students at Hogwarts. Why don't you do that for the people at Azkaban? Surely you should be able to do this." Also, the whole thing about this is that Sirius is actually innocent, and I guess wizards don't have forensics whatsoever, and there's even that part in the stupid Fantastic Beasts series, there's that retcon in the second movie where you're able to track someone's whereabouts in the past using this wand to make like holograms of where they've gone, so they'd easily be able to prove Sirius is innocent unless this is like a dystopian ministry thing where they just wanted to shut him up, which I don't think is what's intended. And Stan also says that Sirius murdered people in front of witnesses and everything, and then he just laughed as the police came to arrest him. Then the reinforcements from the ministry got there, and he went with them quiet as anything, still laughing his head off. So Harry, after all of this shit, ends up at the Leaky Cauldron, and the bus people find out that he's Harry Potter and he lied, and he said his name was Neville before, so they get confused as fuck. The Minister for Magic, Cornelius Fudge, is there to talk to Harry and just sweep away all of the laws he just broke, and even set him up with a nice room there, because what is favoritism? He also got all of his luggage and his school books just cause. They're definitely giving him special preferences, and they also have a department for this, which is very fucking useless considering they don't do anything. And they also describe Fudge as an uncle surveying his favorite nephew, which is both favoritism and creepy as fuck. You're telling me that there are so many departments in the wizard government and they're somehow more useless and corrupt than our own government? I should trust these guys even less than I trust our governments, and I don't trust our governments at all, so how is that possible? Fudge also says the Dursleys want to take Harry back for some fucking reason, so he's welcome back at their house at the end of the school year. They also got Aunt Marge back to normal. I don't understand how, and I don't understand how she's not dead. The government just must have bullied the Dursleys into taking Harry back. I don't see how they would have otherwise. It almost sounds like Rowling keeps writing herself into a corner and just being like, nah, they're NPCs, they reset, so they take Harry back anyway. It's just what happens, you know? It just works. Harry also has some seriously unstable magic. The other people in his class don't seem to be doing the same thing, so shouldn't he be in extra classes to try and make up for it? Fudge also gives me weird vibes. Not even just corrupt politician vibes, but like weird vibes as a human, pedo-van vibes. He says that Harry should stay in Diagon Alley and not go too further, but doesn't say why, even though it's very transparent that he's hiding something, and he should probably just tell Harry anyway. I love making things more complicated than it needs to be. Harry wanders around the alley and looks at weird stuff as well, including more parentheses, and more parentheses. Why there's so many? Harry sees a new model of broomstick and comes to stare at it every single day. The Firebolt is what it's called, and what Harry wants, Harry will get. He also sees those sentient books trying to kill each other in a shop window. Torn pages flying everywhere as the books grappled with each other. These gimmick books are everywhere. There's even the Invisible Book of Invisibility, which again seems on the surface to be some sort of wacky like, oh, this wizard school is fun, not like your boring human school, but it's so useless. Why wouldn't you just have some sort of like weird gimmick thing that comes in tandem with the book where you can read about it and then it teaches you a spell how to like turn the book invisible and then not invisible and then invisible again that you can learn through the school year. Making things harder than they need to be isn't making it like whimsical or special, it just makes it like annoying. There's also a book called Death Omens for when you know the worst is coming. I'm surprised that these aren't well documented enough anyway, because it seems like another thing where people treat it as if it doesn't have any proof, when in the magic world basically everything has a lot of proof, people just ignore it. Harry also tries to neaten his hair, and his sentient mirror, because of course, talks back to him. He runs into Ron and Hermione when they come to stay, and they went to get some of the monster books as well. I understand the books being difficult if they have a purpose, but what is the point of the books being this way? There doesn't seem to be any purpose. Surely the assistants must know that you stroke the spine of the book to make them calm. They should probably tell these people that since they're in danger whenever they try to get these books out. And if Hagrid knows this, and it's probably written somewhere in the book, then why isn't this standard knowledge across the entire manufacturing and distributing companies? Hermione also has a really packed timetable and like 1 million books, and her subjects seem really sus, but she gets angry at them when they question it. How is she even allowed to get a time turner as an underage wizard? If underage wizards can't even cast magic other than specific circumstances like school where they can, how the fuck is she allowed to control time like this? And also, the whole idea of it is stupid too, because study load is a very particular kind of thing. When I was in university, it was like, you have to do this number of subjects and you can't do any more because there's too much stress on you. It's the whole thing that should apply here. I'm pretty sure it's to do with like student health and welfare, that you can't overload your students on subjects like this, so I don't know how it's not breaking a lot of laws in the first place, as well as the whole thing that time travel is real and no one seems to care. She also decides that she wants a pet, which apparently costs 10 galleons, which doesn't seem like that much for a living being, but okay. Ron takes his fat-ass, ugly-ass rat to the vet because he's sure that the rat is sick. Said the witch, picking up Scabbers. How old is this rat? I'm sure that these people should be able to tell what a normal rat is and what an animagus or a human disguised as a rat is. There should be some sort of magical way to tell, because there is a registry for these sort of things. Whenever someone is allowed to learn how to turn into these things, they have to register, so people should be able to tell the difference. Hell, at the end of the book there's even a spell that Lupin casts to reveal an animagus in a human form. Taken into consideration, surely at least some vets should be able to know whether or not there's something magical going on with the animal. But this lady is just like, nah, your rat's fucked, mate, and then just like hands it back to him. Ginny shows up and all she does the entire series is simp for Harry, because he needs forced love interest since he has 0 personality and it's not going to come naturally. Also, they're going to the platform by Ministry car now because of Harry, but it's very obvious that something is up, but they're still not telling Harry what it is. So once they've been informed of this, which is going to happen the next morning, they're all fucking around and Harry goes down to pick up some books and stuff, but he notices that the parents are whispering to each other, so he eavesdrops on them. Arthur says that Harry's got a right to know, which he does. Molly, how many times do I have to tell you? They didn't report it in the press because Fudge wanted it kept quiet, but Fudge went out to Azkaban that night. The guards told Fudge that Black's been talking in his sleep for a while now. Always the same words. He's at Hogwarts. Black is deranged, Molly, and he wants Harry dead. If you ask me, he thinks murdering Harry will bring you-know-who back to power. Black lost everything the night Harry stopped you-know-who, and he's had 12 years alone in Azkaban to brood on that. I wonder how much Sirius actually knows though, because the Dementors and whatnot, it doesn't seem like you can really navigate Azkaban that well, and you can't really receive that much outside news. Fred and George fuck with Percy by making his badge spell out a different name, which, you know, is another thing that isn't explained, that they have Inspect Element as a spell. Harry goes to bed and decides that his priorities are not about avoiding being murdered, but about going on the school trip. No, all in all, the thing that bothered Harry most was the fact that his chances of visiting Hogsmeade now looked like 0. They go to the platform the next day and Arthur guides them all there. With a meaningful look at Harry, he leaned casually against the barrier. Harry imitated him. Why are they doing that when they specifically need to run to the barrier beforehand? In the first and second one they clearly do that, but in this one they're just like leaning on it. And I'm confused because how do you lean against something that apparently has no substantial feel? It's just a gateway, there's no brick there. So after they go in, Harry is taken aside by Arthur. The whole lore is explained to him. And Arthur's like, promise me, you won't go looking for Black. I was going to make a joke. I'm not gonna make the joke cause I could get in trouble. They board the train and find a compartment with someone already inside having a snooze. Professor J.R. Lupin was stamped across one corner in peeling letters. Why is he here instead of the staff carriage? Anyway, so they ignore him and talk about stupid shit. Also, there's a word interestedly, which I didn't even know was a word, and I fucking hate it. It's one of the worst adverbs I've ever seen in my entire life. They also talk about the what now? There's goblin rebellions and you just gloss over this? Malfoy shows up. The only 2 things he does in this entire book is talk about Harry and talk about getting injuries from the hippogriff. You think I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. You'll see. We'll go over quite a lot of Malfoy appearances in this book, and the entire time only covers 2 topics because Malfoy is just being Malfoy. Well, look who it is, said Malfoy in his usual lazy drawl, pulling open the compartment door. Potty and the Weasel. Why are you so obsessed with them? Please leave, please. So the idiots leave and Harry sees a Dementor coming in and it ends up attacking Harry because of course it does. Its face was completely hidden beneath its hood. Harry's eyes darted downward. What he saw made his stomach contract. So if they're let into the compartments and they're that horrible, why are they let in unsupervised? Every single time they appear, they could get a student killed. They've killed a lot of inmates. He was being dragged downward, the roaring growing louder. And then he wakes up, the peanut gallery give their recap on what happened, and Lupin gives him chocolate. Harry didn't understand. This is evident. They arrive at Hogwarts and they pass Hagrid on the platform taking the first years into the boats. I also think it's kind of strange that they're taking them across the lake when it's apparently such a dangerous time and the lake seems kind of risky. Malfoy is there at the entrance though because he goes over to Harry and says some shit because he needs a hobby. Harry is not a hobby. Do you have anything else to do? If you really like him that much, just try a different tactic because this shit's not working, honey. But Harry and Hermione go to be checked by the medical lady because he got yeeted by a Dementor. Pomfrey says something about Harry being delicate because he keeps passing out in every single school year. But he also knows the Dementors are going to be around the school, and he sees Dumbledore giving the speech, indicating that Dumbledore really doesn't like the Dementors being around. Rolling, please. Also, Hagrid is now the creature teacher, the magical creature teacher. Which, I mean, I love Hagrid, I get it, I'm happy for him, but how is he allowed to do this when he's not qualified? He never passed school, he got expelled and then he was allowed on the grounds again, even though he, I guess, got cleared of the charges from the shit that happened last year, because he has a history of that kind of thing. He wouldn't be allowed to work with magical creatures, I think, especially because the Ministry doesn't like him and they are very into favoritism, so I'm sure that they would just say that he wasn't qualified purely because they don't like him. The passwords to all the dormitories are going to change very much this year because of security. Oh no, said Neville Longbottom sadly. He always had trouble remembering passwords. Is he retarded? I think there's something wrong with that boy. As the school year begins, Malfoy still decides that Harry is a hobby and keeps joking about Dementors and stuff instead of getting a hobby. Malfoy did a ridiculous rendition of a swooning fit and there was a roar of laughter. My man's a yandere at this rate. They also talk about Azkaban for a bit because Harry doesn't know much about it, and it is stated that most prisoners go mad in there because of the condition. Hermione has classes that are at the same time as other classes and it clearly makes no sense. She brandishes this and is apparently supposed to be keeping it a secret, but she's doing a very bad job of it. Ron sees it, he asks her what the fuck is going on, and Hermione gets mad at him because she doesn't have a good cover up and she just blames it on him. I guess she's on a period or something. Oh Ron, what's it to you if my schedule's a bit full? Hermione snapped. I told you, I fixed it all with Professor McGonagall. How does that justify having two classes at the same time, bitch? He's your friend. He wants to know. The gang are going to divination and they have to run across the entire castle for each class. It's honestly ridiculous how they're supposed to show up on time and there's no excuse for them showing up late even though the castle is fucking massive. How does a disabled student even get across the school, assuming that they even exist in the wizarding world? They ask this coked out knight and he runs off to help them find the classroom like a hyperactive toddler. Side note, if you're painting something with blood or cocaine, does that reflect in the personality of the person that you're painting when they come to life inside the painting? A quest! The knight's rage seemed to vanish instantly. He clanked to his feet and shouted, "Come follow me, dear friends, and we will find our goal, or else perish bravely in the charge." This guy needs some Xanax. So the psychic lady, Professor Trelawney, said the books are not good in class and it's more practical, so Hermione gets very angry, but more importantly, the sentences here are absolutely fucking awful. I have to show this and emphasize it because I really can't stress how fucking terrible it is. So she just stated that books are not good enough in class. She just said the sentence, and the next part of the page goes, at those words, both Harry and Ron glanced grinning at Hermione, who looked startled at the news that books wouldn't help much in the subject. We know, you just stated that. Why did you need to state it in the next paragraph when you had just stated that in the sentence prior? Are you fucking serious? You will interpret the patterns using pages 5 and 6 of Unfogging the Future. So they have all this magic bullcrap, literal time travel, but fortune telling thing is just too unrealistic. Also, she predicts Neville is going to break a specific cup and he does that immediately, and the rest of the class does very specific things that she also predicted beforehand. So I get that there's some sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, like nebulous aspect to it, but it also seems like Rowling wants the subject to be kind of up in the air and interpreted a certain way, like whether or not it's real, but she also makes it so clearly real, it's not a good balance. So she sees a dog in Harry's cup and freaks out because it means death. She basically does that thing that girls on Facebook do, where they're like, I've had such a bad day, don't bother asking me what happened today, and then they expect you to ask them. So they also begin learning about some other shit, and animagus is one of them. But of course, there is a parentheses involved, because why the fuck wouldn't there be? McGonagall, who is teaching the class, also doesn't understand psychics and says that the whole class is bullshit, even though it seemed pretty fucking spot on to me. Hermione goes into some angry bullshit with these guys because they're having a conversation and she just fucks off to, like, Hermione getting angry. It's almost as much as Draco getting obsessed with Harry every single page. They show up to magical creatures class and everyone is trying to figure out how the fuck to read these books. Some of them are just keeping them closed as well. Does the book need food or water? Is it really a living being? Also, Malfoy's being a dumbass again. Careful, Potter, there's a Dementor behind you. Malfoy. Please. Hagrid introduces a hippogriff and asks if anyone wants to try, but no one wants to try and pet it or approach it, so Harry steps forward to make Hagrid feel better, and then he almost fucking dies as he gets on the thing. He just had time to seize the hippogriff around the neck before he was soaring upward. It was nothing like a broomstick. Wow, so you're telling me that a piece of wood and a bird are two different things? So he comes back perfectly fine. If he had died during this time, I don't know what the fuck they would have done, but everyone else tries it, and Malfoy decides he wants to taunt it and it gets him. But at least he has another topic to talk about now besides Harry. So after all of that, Malfoy starts faking an injury and has all this attention from it. Then Harry and gang go to visit Hagrid because he's really sad after all of that. Buckbeak is in trouble, so he's afraid, and then he gets mad at them for coming down to see him during the evening because it's dangerous. Come on, said Hagrid angrily. I'm taking you back to the school and don't let me catch you walking down to see me after dark again. I'm not worth that. But then during meal times at the mall, Malfoy keeps going on about how much his injury hurts him, and he shows that he's faking it very clearly. Yeah, said Malfoy, putting on a brave sort of grimace, but Harry saw him wink at Crabbe and Goyle when Pansy had looked away. This surely wouldn't work because everyone has a bias against Slytherin. Like, they probably wouldn't even believe him at this point. Also, it would be easy to prove that he's faking the injury because of the amount of medical advancements that they have in the fucking hospital wing as it is. In potions class, Malfoy makes everyone do everything for him because he fakes his arm being too fragile to cut the potions ingredients. Snape just lets him do that because Snape is trash. Ron ends up fucking up Malfoy's potion on purpose, so then Ron gets his ingredients swapped with Malfoy's because Snape is trash. Snape also picks on Neville because Snape is trash. Go in the bin, Snape. Go in the bin. Neville was pink and trembling. He looked as though he was on the verge of tears. They go on to talk about Sirius Black and what he did, but more importantly, how the fuck could the Ministry not catch him at all? Harry goes on to Lupin's class and everyone is just in there waiting to start, but Malfoy has to make it about Harry. Malfoy passed them, walking between Crabbe and Goyle. He smirked at Harry and disappeared. Seriously, get a hobby, go fishing, play a video game, read a book, start an art journal, knit. Hermione also shows up late because she was doing casual time travel shenanigans. Peeves is in the spare classroom they need to go to, so Lupin gets rid of him. With the force of a bullet, the wad of chewing gum shot out of the keyhole and straight down Peeves' left nostril. He whirled upright and zoomed away, cursing. I thought Peeves was not corporeal, or is that like a specific sort of spell that hits things that aren't corporeal? And is that a specific spell that shoots gum into someone's nose? Or did he have to like measure? Is it like a cannon or like a slingshot spell where he has to aim it in a specific way? Lupin then introduces a boggart, something that takes the form of your fear and freaks you out, I guess. How to combat something like this. He gets Neville to go up, and since he's scared of Snape, to make Snape wear his funny grandma's clothes with a spell that defeats the boggart. Why this specifically? Like, what if you can't think of something funny for your fear to transform into? Not everyone gets a turn, but most people do, and Hermione wishes she had a go, and I'm also pretty curious about what she would actually see as her fear, because I don't remember if we ever actually got to find out, besides at the very end, and even then she was talking about it, so I don't know if it would have changed over time. The classes are getting more and more hectic, and Snape is even more trash now because of his shitty mood. Worst of all was potions. Snape was in a particularly vindictive mood these days. During Quidditch, they confirmed that Harry is so good at this crap that he has never lost a match ever. And we've got a seeker who's never failed to win us a match. How boring is that? There's no stakes, there's no fun in the sport whatsoever because you just keep winning guaranteed. In divination, Lavender got the news that her hamster died, and Hermione says that Trelawney predicting this wasn't actually a real prediction because it was too vague to be anything other than one-size-fits-all kind of prediction. The thing is, I understand where she's coming from, but she specifically says this while Lavender is fucking crying in front of her. Like, stop being such a bitch, oh my god. During the holidays, Harry of course stays around. Look who it is! "Staying here, Potter," shouted Malfoy, who was standing in line with Crabbe and Goyle. "Got scared of passing the Dementors? Sports, reading, woodwork, metalwork, painting, gardening, cooking, scrapbook." Then we get another reminder that the portrait to get into the dorm is sentient, and her entire job is just to stay there and let the students in when they need to, but then she goes on vacation so they can't get into the door, or she stays asleep even though she knows that students are gonna come in. What's the point in waking me up? It's your job, you fucking bint. So then Lupin talks to Harry about how he should have been able to have a go with the boggart or whatever. "Clearly I was wrong," said Lupin, still frowning at Harry, "but I didn't think it was a good idea for Lord Voldemort to materialize in the staff room. I imagine that people would panic. Isn't everyone else scared of Voldemort as well? Like, they would just know it's fake. Like, if Hitler just showed up as a boggart, everyone would be like, okay, just get rid of it then. What if one of the students has a fear that's just way too personal for everyone else in the class to know? Wouldn't it be safer to just do them one at a time? But it just makes more sense to me if everyone saw the boggart as their own particular fear at the same time, so it would make it more ambiguous and a bit more interesting storytelling wise. Like, maybe Hermione saw something so horrible about her past that she hasn't told anyone else, so she'd make up something for what she saw and they would know that she's lying, but they don't want to ask her or something, you know? He also says that Snape gives him potions and stuff for his health, and alludes to some things with potion and taste having some sort of chemical relation, which I would like to know more about, but alas we do not. After this, Harry talks to the gang about it, and they suspect Snape is poisoning Lupin because they always suspect Snape every single book even though he doesn't even fucking do anything. "The Dementors send their love, Potter. Kayaking, map making, tabletop RPG, anthropology, basket weaving, diving." They find out that the portrait into the dormitory has been attacked and she had her frame and canvas slashed. The fat lady had vanished from her portrait, which had been slashed so violently that strips of canvas littered the floor. Great chunks of it had been torn away completely. So how does a portrait die? Like, if your frame is destroyed, you don't die, so it's not like a Dorian Gray type of thing going on. So if she hides in another portrait and someone burns her frame, is she still alive in that other portrait now? Is she like an entity that exists in the portrait dimension, or does she actually die if her entire frame is destroyed? She explains that Sirius Black somehow broke in. Dumbledore makes everyone in the dorm sleep under teacher supervision somewhere else because there's some fucky shit going on. One casual wave of his wand and the long tables flew to the edges of the hall, stood themselves against the wall. Another wave and the floor had been covered in hundreds of squishy purple sleeping bags. OP magic. Does this cause the sleeping bags to exist, or does this mean that they always existed but they just got summoned to this part of the castle? So they're talking about how Sirius could have entered the castle, and Hermione gives us some lore. "Because the castle is protected by more than walls, you know," said Hermione. "There are all sorts of enchantments on it to stop people entering by stealth. You can't just apparate in there, and I'd like to see the disguise that could fool those Dementors." Apparently what can fool Dementors is a dog, because that's how Sirius got in, so that's a seriously pretty big loophole in the protection spell. How the fuck does Dumbledore even know everything and then lets it happen? Like, if he knows that Sirius is innocent and lets Sirius get into the school because he clearly knows something's going on, why doesn't he assist in getting Sirius out of jail through like a legal system? And clearly there's no forensics magic, so what else is he gonna, like, how else is Sirius gonna get out of this? The whole third floor has been searched, he's not there, and Filch has done all the dungeons, nothing there either. The third floor is always the most sus floor, like, just throw it in the bin, throw the whole floor in the bin. It seems to be almost impossible that Black could have entered the school without inside help. I did express my concerns when you appointed, and then Dumbledore cuts Snape off, and he's like, "No, it's fine, fuck, shut up, Snape." Dumbledore knows exactly what's going on. He is just as responsible for all the fucked up shit that happens in this world. So they start getting oversight for everything that they do, and the teachers just kind of follow them around, and it makes me wonder why they didn't do this from the start of the school year. And Madam Hooch ends up overseeing broomstick shit, which I assume she already did, but I wonder why she didn't. Also, weird thing, did you know that Madam Hooch is the narrator for the second Fable game? I only just realized that. Anyway, Malfoy also gets out of a lot of this stuff because he continues faking his injury, which, again, you can clearly prove that he was faking it if you send him to the hospital. Snape is doing Defense Against the Dark Arts because Lupin is sick, and he keeps finding excuses to take points away from the houses. I do not understand how he's allowed to do this crap. Hermione asks some questions and talks about the crap that the class is about. By all means, she's not wrong, she's not stepping out of bounds here, but Snape, like, makes it look like she's doing something wrong, and he keeps taking points away from her because he's trash. Go in the bin, Snape. He also wants an essay for werewolves as a subject. 2 rolls of parchment on the subject, which seems a bit more finicky than like A4 pages, but you know, whatever. There's another terrible parentheses sentence hybrid. Circa dogging using that language in my Minecraft server. They need to play sports now and it's raining, but this seems to be a problem that's easily solvable by making all of the players like repel water. They have clothing that could easily be enchanted to repel water. Hermione also gives Harry like waterproof glasses, so why didn't they do this since the start? Such is the popularity of Quidditch that the whole school turned out to watch the match. So they're sitting down watching it in the stands that have covers, yet no one else who's playing the game has any defense against the rain, which seems pretty ridiculous to me. Malfoy and Co are laughing at them under an umbrella for some reason. Sewing, bird-watching, dance, poetry, code-cracking, tea-making. The bludgers are also attacking players and they can't see in the rain, so it's a whole risk, but no one's doing anything about it. Harry also has a disadvantage because he's wearing glasses. Doesn't this necessitate anti-rain spells be put into place in every single sports game? Because Hermione then does this and then she's like, hey, you can see now because I made your glasses waterproof. So he went from having a disadvantage to now having an advantage because he can see without the rain getting in his way. So then we get some dialogue about the Potters being murdered when the Dementors attack Harry and he gets like a flashback. I guess he's like Ray from the Promised Neverland and he just remembers everything. Why are the Dementors even close enough to the match to get into the stadium? So Harry wakes up in the hospital wing and everyone is gathered around him. Come on, Harry. You've never missed a snitch before. He almost dies, and then he gets knocked out and they're like, nah, the game is more important. So Ron tells him what happened. Dumbledore magicked you onto a stretcher, said Ron, and then walked up to the school with you floating on it. Weird they don't do this to anyone else. Like, if it wasn't Harry, would they just leave the student to die? Harry Broomstick is dead too. So then Harry has another pity party. No one else heard the echoes of their dying parents. There's only one way to fix that. Neville or Luna have witnessed death before, so surely they would be attacked just as much as Harry, but Harry has main character syndrome because, like, even then, Neville has been through so much worse than Harry. Like, his parents were tortured to death, and he lives with his grandma, and he's always felt like an outcast, and he has, like, a lot of people tease him, and he feels like he's not good at anything, but apparently Harry just being Harry is way more important. Malfoy was almost beside himself with glee at the Gryffindor's defeat. Calligraphy, architecture, antique restoration, hunting, ARGs. Lupin continues to indulge Harry's ego by giving him an explanation for why he is so special. The Dementors affect you worse than the others because they are horrors in your past that others don't have. Fuck Neville then, am I right? And the worst thing that happened to you, Harry, is enough to make anyone fall off their broom. You have nothing to feel ashamed of. He also explains how they're hungry because Dumbledore hasn't let them have any souls in the school, so I wonder how this fiasco even happened in the first place. Harry is moping around because he can't go to Hogsmeade, and then Fred and George turn up to give him the magic map, which will give him all of those, like, locations and things. It's basically giving him console at this point. We don't reckon Filch ever found out how to work it. He probably suspected what it was though, he wouldn't have confiscated it when they stole it from when they first got into his office. Apparently the map was just lying in his drawer for like 20 years and he never even tried to use it. The map showed a secret set of passages that he had never entered, and many of them seemed to lead right into Hogsmeade. He then watches himself walking to the passage, saying something. It's basically like a console command at this point. He learns the word that he needs to say. I guess the map is sentient too. And then he gets to control Shift-C and go through the statue into the passage and the no-clip and whatever. It's just astounding to me what the government or the teachers don't know and that young wizards can just figure out while they're fucking around on the weekend. There are so many fucking parentheses in the candy shop description. I think my soul just died, and I don't even have a soul, so I don't know how that happened. So he meets up with his friends and tells them about the Honeydukes passage and the weird map, and they're like, what the fuck are you on about? See, said Ron quietly, I'd like to see Black try and break into Honeydukes with the Dementors swarming all over the village. The Dementors will just kill one of the students before they actually catch someone. If you kill all the students, none of the students can murder other students, see? Big thonk. Ron also explains all the weird shit you'd see in wizard candy. Acid pops. Fred gave me one of those when I was 7, and it fucking burned a hole in my tongue because it's acid and I died. So they meet up in the bar and drink some stuff, and then the teachers show up. They hide and listen to the teachers for some extra lore. Somewhere above him, Hermione whispered, Mobilarbus. The tree beside them rose a few inches off the ground, drifted sideways, and landed with a soft thump right in front of their table. Aren't there like 7 different spells now that just move shit around? Rosmerta, my dear, I don't like them any more than you do. Necessary precaution, very unfortunate, but there you are. The minister is like speaking about this shit randomly, casually, in front of everyone. I wonder how empty the bar even is for them to be able to hear this shit. Black and Potter, ringleaders of their little gang, both very bright of course, exceptionally bright. In fact, I don't think I've ever had such a pair of troublemakers. Regarding James Potter and Sirius Black's friendship in school, they also go on to explain how the Potters hid from Voldemort with this bullshit ass spell called the Fidelius Charm, involving the magical concealment of a secret inside a single living soul. The information is hidden inside the chosen person, a secret keeper, and is henceforth impossible to find unless the secret keeper chooses to divulge it. Excuse me, can you elaborate? What the fuck does that mean? They continue speculating about Harry being given to Voldemort by Sirius in exchange for power, and Hagrid gets particularly mad. Nobody but trained hit wizards from Magical Law Enforcement Squad would have stood a chance against Black once he was cornered. 20 members of Magical Law Enforcement, and none of them could catch this fucker. So there are, firstly, hit wizards is such a stupid name, I love it. But secondly, there's basically the wizard CIA, and none of you could do anything about this guy. But what do you think he's broken out to do? He isn't trying to rejoin Voldemort, is he? Do they have no forensic team? They don't have like any interrogation rooms where anyone can go and figure out what the motive is or anything? Harry also has another lore flashback, and some emotions happen once they get out of there. There was his mother, alight with happiness, arm in arm with his dad, and there, that must be him, their best man. Harry had never given him a thought before. And then Neville, there's some more bullshit with Neville. Neville reminds me a bit of Tug, you know that? Harry gets mad while they're standing by the Shrieking Shack and has a tantrum while Hermione yells some shit at him and Ron just stands there looking confused and useless. Harry says, "Malfoy knows. Remember what he said to me in Potions. If it was me, I'd hunt him down myself. I want revenge." You fucking dumbass. Rolling, I will appear at your house at 3 AM. When they get back, however, they see Hagrid got a letter about the dangerous magical creatures committee thing, and they want to do something about it. Do wizards have insurance? Dear Mr. Hagrid, further to our inquiry into the attack by a hippogriff on a student in your class, we have accepted the assurances of Professor Dumbledore that you will bear no responsibility from the regrettable incident. Kind of a weird process they got, considering Hagrid has no qualifications and shouldn't even be using magic, but they don't bust him for that, they just bust the animal for being an animal. There followed a list of school governors. The governors are such flip-floppers, I'm sure they'd have changed their mind as soon as they wrote that. Hagrid also complains about the government corruption as well. Disposal devils, they're all in Lucius Malfoy's pocket. Because they seem to be in like a perpetual flip-flop against what Dumbledore says and what the Malfoys say, so I guess it just who brings up the issue first. Hagrid brings up Azkaban or something, and Hermione has a galaxy brain question to ask. After a pause, Hermione says timidly, "Is it awful in there, Hagrid? What the fuck do you think?" Harry one day gets a broomstick while he's at mealtime because everyone just gives him everything he wants, especially brooms during mealtime. Malfoy can't have anything nice, and when he gets something nice, Harry has to get something better because Harry must always win every single time. Harry is dear leader, lord and savior. It's a firebolt, identical to the dream broom Harry had gone to see every day in Diagon Alley. Coveting is good for you. I wonder how Sirius even got this thing, like did he steal it or something, because there is no way that he could walk into a broom store and be like, "Hey, I'm not the guy that the police are looking for, just trust me, I have a sombrero on." So they want to hide the broom from the others because they don't want it to cause a fiasco and bring up Malfoy. Hermione has a really big concern, mind you, a valid concern, and they're treating her like she's crazy even though it's a very real concern. And like, firstly, the way that the school is designed, apparently curses wouldn't be allowed to make their way into Hogwarts, so I think a cursed object wouldn't get past the walls, but at the same time I feel like she's right because he suddenly got a broom from an anonymous source and he doesn't get any hints to who got it for him, and now it seems like there's someone out to kill him. For all we know, it's someone out to kill him. We don't know that the Sirius is a good guy yet, so obviously Hermione is in the right, but they're like, "Oh my god, Hermione is such a nerd," wanting Harry to not die. Ron also says that his rat is getting sick and he thinks it's because of the cat. Dumbledore's eyes were twinkling as well. I mean, that seems to happen a lot. Maybe you should get that checked out, buddy. Professor Lupin will not be with us for very long. He seems aware himself that his time is short, says Trelawney. What a Debbie Downer. McGonagall shows up and takes the broom and wants to check for curses first, which she should. And if you don't know who it's from, you definitely need to have it checked out. Harry just is like, nah, I'm mad at you anyway, Hermione, even though you're like, are the only correct person in the situation. And like, Hermione is not my favorite character. I don't really like her, honestly. She's kind of annoying, but she's right. There's nothing wrong with it, said Harry, his voice shaking slightly. You can't know that, Potter, said Professor McGonagall quite kindly. Harry knew that Hermione meant well, but that didn't stop him from being angry with her, because Harry is a dumbass. And they use a bonfire full of salamanders for warmth. This kind of popped out of nowhere. Is this like a regular occurrence? They're talking about what's wrong with Lupin, and Hermione must be on her period again. All fucking year at this point, because she gets angry at them when they don't get it. Well, isn't it obvious, said Hermione with a look of maddening superiority. If you don't want to tell us, don't, snapped Ron. Fine, said Hermione haughtily, and she marched off. So she goes and finds out this thing about Lupin, and it could be a concern that the rest of the students should know, and she's also very proactive about doing things to protect Harry from Sirius Black, yet when it comes to the Lupin information about him being a werewolf, she's like, nah, fuck it, they can die. Lupin then teaches Harry how to deal with Dementors because they seem to be going after him quite a lot, and he explains that Patronus is a kind of anti-Dementor, a guardian that acts as a shield between you and the Dementor. And it's kind of strange that I've never seen the staff use them. It's basically like an anti-Monokuma, if you will. They try it once and Harry immediately fails because it's a very advanced spell. Here, said Lupin, handing him a chocolate frog. Eat this before we try again. I didn't expect you to do it on your first time. In fact, I would have been astounded if you did. But how does it work on a boggart when a boggart doesn't have these powers? Like, it doesn't really make sense. Like, if you created a very dangerous thing using a boggart, would the boggart essentially be able to act as that thing? Like, what is its power scale? If it can go from like Dementor's power scale to like Voldemort's power scale, wouldn't it essentially like create another Voldemort? And then Voldemort could easily get some people who are scared of Voldemort, have the boggarts transform into them, and then have those Voldemorts do his dirty work essentially. That's what I'm getting, because I don't really understand the power scale of a boggart. There's this whole thing about magical creatures in general. Well, you could like banish one using Ridiculous, but could you also just kill one using a gun or something like that? Because that kind of complicates things for me. At least. Maybe I'm asking too many questions. The next day, Harry and friends are hanging out, and Hermione is having some stress time because her student workload is apparently getting the best of her. Oliver Wood, the Quidditch captain, went to check on the firebolt, but McGonagall told him to fuck off, or as he puts it, she got a bit shirty with me. She what now? Do you want to elaborate on that, bud? Ron suggests getting another broom in the meantime, like a Nimbus 2001 like Malfoy's got, and Harry says, I'm not buying anything like Malfoy's got. Okay, Harry, Malfoy wants good health, breathing, water. He also wants school supplies and good parents and to start a good healthy family with lots of healthy children, have a wholesome lifestyle. Do you not want those anymore? Lupin explains why Dementors are also fucking terrifying and what they do to people. You can exist without your soul, you know, as long as your brain and heart are still working. I need the mechanics of this. This also confirms the existence of souls, and Harry just doesn't seem to really give a shit about that. What is the difference between souls and ghosts, if there is one? Because ghosts seem to exist, but then there are certain people who die who just don't become ghosts. What's the criteria for this? And there's another parenthesis that also indicates that wizards don't understand how electricity works, which is one of the dumbest things that I've ever heard. So Ron goes off to his dormitory bed and comes back with some terrible news. Scabbers is missing, and he found blood and orange cat hair on the floor. So the cat basically knows that the rat is a human in disguise, and if the cat knows it, that means that some animals can identify this, which means that the vet, or at least the government, should use these animals to try and figure out if someone's an animagus that isn't in the registry. It seems very simple to do. Now it's time for the Quidditch match. Harry, you've sorted out your Dementor problem, haven't you? He mentions it like Harry's got a UTI or something. It's a Dementor, it's not like a genital disease. He sees Crookshanks and he gets all suspicious, but then he gets on his firebolt once he gets it back just in time, and everyone's like, oh my god. The Slytherin team were all looking thunderstruck. Did you see his face? Said Ron gleefully, looking back at Malfoy. He can't believe it, this is brilliant. Ron, don't you start on Malfoy, please. Draco Malfoy had arrived for a closer look. History, ancestry, reviewing, soap making, candle making, Conspiracy theories. Harry thinks he sees a Dementor running out onto the field, so he does a spell, the Whatsits Patronus, and it miraculously works. Something silver white, something enormous erupted from the end of his wand. He knew it had shot directly at the Dementors, but didn't pause to watch. His mind still miraculously clear, he looked ahead. He was nearly there. Perfect at sports and spell casting. Did you inherit that from Daddy too? What memory did you think of that could possibly make this shit work? So then he finishes the game and he realizes it wasn't a Dementor, but Draco Malfoy and co dressed up as a Dementor, somehow having snuck onto the field and getting dressed and none of the staff noticing at all what was going on. Hagrid gets them to come over to his hut. Ron is very, very adamant that Hermione is the big bad, and even though she's very upset, and Harry, even though Harry isn't mad at her, he always gets lumped in with whoever is. Like, if Ron is mad at Hermione, then Harry will be like shunted to one side or the other. He's just like a blank, he's like a puppy that just follows them around, and whoever's having a fight, he kind of gets into the middle of it and doesn't have a mind of his own. And then Ron says, "No," said Ron flatly, "if she just acted like she was sorry, but she'll never admit she's wrong. Hermione, she's still acting like Scabbers was gone on vacation or something. Jesus Christ, Ron, settle down." Later that night, Harry wakes up to Ron screaming about Sirius Black in the dorms, and everyone panics. "Look at the curtains, I tell you, he was there." They all scrambled out of bed. Harry reached the dormitory door first, and then they sprinted back down the staircase. Doors opened behind them, and sleepy voices called after them. Like, how in the fuck? When the teacher gets called, the portrait confirms that he was there. And this portrait is there for a reason. He should have been told that to not let Sirius Black in, but this portrait is so fucking stupid that he's like, "Yeah, lol, whatever, here's the password." And the passwords were written down because Neville had written them down, so security gets upped. Flitwick is teaching the doors, who are sentient apparently, how to recognize a picture of Sirius Black if he comes into the castle, which I'm wondering, why the hell isn't he doing that the very first part of the year? Does everyone in the castle just not have any privacy because every single object is sentient at all times? Also, Harry and Ron and Hermione don't think anyone else knows about the Honeydukes passage, so they don't tell anyone about it. Poor Neville was forced to wait outside the common room every night for somebody to let him in, while the security trolls leered unpleasantly at him. Firstly, security trolls. Secondly, that seems a bit cruel. Then Hagrid sends them a letter. "Dear Harry and Ron, how about having tea with me this afternoon?" So Hagrid, when they go there, Hagrid goes on about Hermione, but Ron is not having it. "Really upset she was when Black nearly stabbed you, Ron. She's got her heart in the right place, Hermione. And you two not talking to her." And then they just like don't give a shit at all. Harry just kind of blankly there like an NPC, but Ron has a hissy fit about it. Then Harry sneaks out again. The third floor corridor seemed to be deserted. Harry scanned the map carefully and saw with a leap of relief that the tiny dot labelled Snape was now back in his office. So then he finds his friends and goes to fuck around with hitting Malfoy, who assumes that there's a ghost, even though snowballs with spells cast on them to hit a specific person are a thing already. "It came from over there," said Malfoy, wiping his face and staring at a spot 6 feet to the left of Harry. Harry accidentally lets himself be seen and Malfoy runs up to the castle to tattle on him. Harry shows up, and I don't know why he tosses his cloak off the minute that he gets out of the statue portal. Like, everyone can see him, and he just does it anyway. It's so dumb. Why don't you just take it off when you're in the dormitory already? Because Snape just sees him because Snape's already there somehow. And then he takes Snape to go to his office because what is stealth? What is it? Snape asks what the parchment is, and Harry lies and says that it's just a random scrap of paper, which is stupid because obviously Snape is going to want to throw it away. He could have just said that it was a piece of decoration paper or ephemera or something from Hermione, like, "Oh, Hermione got me this piece of paper, it's very precious because she bought it at a stationery shop or something." But no! Lupin then shows up in the nick of time and is like, "Go away, Snape," and then he deals with Harry instead, and by that I mean showing him favoritism. He also reveals that the map is sentient, and they wanted to fuck with Harry. They get a letter for Buckbeak's execution as well. And there's something about how the gang is trying to do stuff to figure out how to help Hagrid with the case of law, like whether or not the animal can be executed, but it doesn't really have any type of consistency because Hagrid would have to be involved and there would have to be qualifications and all that sort of stuff, and So I can't help but think that if it's that broken, that I don't really want to know about it anyway. So I'm kind of glad that she didn't give any details about the lore, because it wouldn't make sense. It would probably just make me angrier. They also, while they're talking about this, they realize that they're being spied on by Malfoy and gang. Ceramics, throat singing, frogs, sublimation, fortune telling. One of the exams they have to do involves their emotions being changed via spells, which is something that we absolutely have to talk about, because what the fuck? The cheering charms had left them with a feeling of great contentment. So is this like the emotion box from Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Or do depressed people even exist in this world? There have to be addicts who have cheering charms used on them so much that they're not even human anymore. Hermione gets triggered at Trelawney bringing up the Grim again, and they have a little stare down. Harry has to play against Slytherin for the final match, because that always happens, and the evil house is trying to slip him up. They're trying to trip him up and injure him very transparently. Shouldn't people keep an eye on these guys, especially with the horrible reputation that they have as being cheaters? Harry also sees the dog again, with Crookshanks, and then he just kind of forgets about it because he's stupid. So the announcer starts bad-mouthing Slytherin, and Draco grabs the end of Harry's broom towards the end of the match while they're playing, which is a very illegal move, and even McGonagall is just like, what the fuck is going on? How are they allowed to play if they're that horrible at what they do? After all of this, Hagrid pusses out and gives them a non-exam, basically, because he can't do shit with Malfoy breathing down his neck and trying to cancel him. So all you have to do is take care of this flubberworm thing, which only flourishes when you don't pay attention to it, so they just ignore it for the whole thing and do whatever they want. The psychic exam is just bullshitting your way through reading a crystal ball. Harry gets grabbed as he leaves, and some spoopy shit happens. Trelawney's first name is Cassandra, which is a reference to the Greek mythology about that woman who is never believed even though all of her predictions come true. The Dark Lord dies alone and friendless, abandoned by his followers. His servant has been chained these 12 years. Tonight, before midnight, the servant will break free and set out to rejoin his master. The Dark Lord will rise again, and with his servant's aid, greater and more terrible than he ever was. Tonight, before midnight, the servant will set out to rejoin his master. Hermione has had enough of the professor and also punches Malfoy, so she's becoming more of a fucking weirdo by the minute. Hermione, I don't know what's gotten into you lately. First you hit Malfoy, then you walk out on Professor Trelawney. Hermione looked rather flattered. Wow, she has human emotions. Like a real human for once. Hagrid is really sad about Buckbeak, and Dumbledore apparently can't do anything. He can or can't do anything based on the plot, I think. He tried, said Hagrid. He has no power to overrule the committee, until he does, that is. While they're on their way back to the dormitories because the execution is about to happen, Ron sees Scabbers and just chases after him like an idiot, even though there's a very dangerous situation going on. He has the cloak for some reason. It's Harry's, but he's letting Ron hold it for some reason. Then the dog appears and yeets Ron into oblivion. The dog's jaws fastened around Ron's outstretched arm. Harry lunged forwards. He seized a handful of the brute's hair, but it was dragging Ron away as easily as if he were a rag doll. So they run after Ron to get into the passageway that goes into the Shrieking Shack. This involves going past that Whomping Willow monstrosity from before. While Ron is doing Ron things, aka moaning in pain, Sirius transforms from a dog to a person and confronts them. How did Hogwarts not find out about any of this shit? Like, they must have known that there was a secret passageway. I mean, Dumbledore knows about it, so why didn't he close it off or guard it or something? It's just left there. So Sirius is fucking crazy. He keeps doing the red herring thing, and he keeps being vague and acting like he's gonna murder Harry. Then Black's free hand found Harry's throat. The fingers tightened, Harry choked, and his glasses went askew. Wait, so if Sirius really doesn't want to kill Harry, then why is he trying to kill Harry? They have a scuffle and the cat is just being useless. What's up with this cat? This cat is apparently way more sentient than any other cat ever. And it's like a special cat. I'm assuming there are other types of magical animals that are way smarter than other animals. Why hasn't anyone utilized this to tell if there's like an animagus around them? So they finally explain the shit with Peter being a rat the entire time. Like, how could he not notice that there was the rat all around? Like, Crookshanks would have told him about this stuff immediately. Apparently she did, but what? Also, because Harry has the map, he could have seen Sirius on the map at any given time. And if Fred and George have had this map since forever, they would have seen Ron sleeping with a man named Peter Pettigrew in his bed every single night for like 2 years and not given a shit about it whatsoever. Hermione argues that Peter can't be a rat because it would be on the register, as if bootlegging doesn't exist. I'd have some serious questions too, but I wouldn't get any answers. And then she says that she went and looked at Professor McGonagall on the register because McGonagall had told her the register exists, and there's only been 7 animagi in the century, so it's apparently very, very hard to do, but some random kids in high school did it. Lupin explains everything with his friends becoming animals because they wanted to keep him company when he transforms into a werewolf, and I don't understand how he wouldn't just attack and overpower them as a werewolf, because he says, they couldn't keep me company as humans, so they kept me company as animals. They were able to keep a werewolf in check. So a deer and a random dog can keep the werewolf in check. Sirius thought it would be amusing to tell Snape all he had to do was go and prod the knot on the tree trunk of the Whomping Willow with a long stick and he'd be able to get in after him. And then Snape almost died. So Sirius had left the fucking map open on his desk before he went to go and confront Sirius and Harry in the Shrieking Shack. So Snape finds it and just sees it blatantly open and he's like, oh cool. And then he comes over and just appears in the scene now, ready to murder some motherfuckers. And all of this could have been solved if Lupin had actually just taken the map with him like anyone else on the planet would. Plus, Snape says that he was gonna get the potion to Lupin because Lupin needs it because he's a werewolf and he needs to prevent himself from, like, you know, going all apeshit, so he has it with him. Expelliarmus, he yelled, except his wasn't the only voice that shouted. There was a blast that made the door rattle on the hinges. Snape was lifted off his feet and slammed into the wall, then slid down to the floor, a trickle of blood oozing from his hair. He seemed to have been knocked out, which is kind of his fault because he went in without backup even though he knew that there was what he believed to be a serial killer in the shack, and a man who hasn't gotten his werewolf medication, but he just shows up alone and it serves him right. So everybody gets over the fact that Snape just showed up and then they tie up Snape and then they take him with them because he's unconscious. But remember, Snape was supposed to show up because he had Lupin's bottle of whatever that helps him with his werewolf bullshit. Lupin does not once check to see if Snape brought it with him, and if Snape had brought it with him, which I believe that he would have, Lupin could have taken it and prevented the entirety of the next scene from happening, but he just doesn't bother looking for it. Sirius also goes on to keep explaining how Crookshanks is like a magic cat because he was able to communicate with her and she was able to talk about the rat and who the rat really was. Harry doesn't understand what's going on, but he's trying his best. Ron doesn't want to give his rat away though because he still doesn't get it, and Lupin that this spell is for animagus to reveal themselves, so it's gonna be okay. He eventually does that, and again, if they had found out sooner, which I believe they could have, none of this would have happened, but of course. Peter is then acting like a rat because he is in the habit of it for 12 years, which makes me think, so later on, Sirius will say that as a dog, his emotions and thoughts are simpler, which implies that your mind kind of adopts some of the characteristics mentally and emotionally of the animal that you transform into. Wouldn't this be impacted on Peter in a very severe kind of way? He just sort of trembles a bit and then after a while he's kind of back to his weaselly self. So then my other question is, I just don't really understand how someone could be an animagus for such a long period of time without completely adopting those characteristics. It's kind of like the Animorphs, like there was that one, I forget his name, but he turns into that hawk or whatever, and he gets stuck like that forever because, well, the way that those work are that they're still as sentient as humans, so there isn't like much mental things changing about them, animal senses and stuff, so when he gets stuck as the hawk, it's really fucking scary because he knows that he's going to be stuck like that forever. But would it be something like this with the animagus where they would get stuck but then they'd be stuck in the minds of animals so they'd gradually forget that they ever were human? Wouldn't that be even scarier? And the entire time I would have repeated myself, but I was basically just wanting to know why it was so hard for them to find him. Peter then reveals that he's basically like Whole Horse, like he just sides with whoever's the most powerful because he doesn't want to be against someone who's more powerful than him. Plus, Peter could have just suffocated Ron or something, but he didn't do anything. And he easily could have just killed Harry. He could have done something as the rat, like put poison in Harry's food or like suffocated him while he slept or something easily, but he just didn't do that because he's stupid. Sirius somehow doesn't go mad in prison, and he explains the thing about the dog where one of the reasons why is because he knew he was innocent, so he basically used the power of friendship and believing in himself to stay away from the goth death machines, and then he explains that his emotions were simpler as a dog. So if that was the case, the jailers would know that he was a dog because they would have seen him as a dog. They would have walked around the prison and seen him transform into a dog. They clearly would have known this, and it would have been part of the information that the wizard public would have gotten, wouldn't it? So he explains, I swam as a dog back to the mainland, I journeyed north and slipped into Hogsmeade as a dog. I've been living in the forest ever since, except when I came to watch the Quidditch, of course. You fly as well as your father did, Harry. How did the dog get into the Quidditch state? You know what, whatever. Harry doesn't want to kill Peter, even though the other two people really want to kill him, but his reasoning is, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because I don't reckon my dad would have wanted them to become killers just for you. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, he can turn back into a rat at any time, so why don't they just knock him out like Snape is knocked out, tie them up, and take him and Snape back with them? Knocking him out would make this so much easier, wouldn't it? They don't do that, because we all know how the story turns out, and if they did knock him out, then the plot wouldn't have happened. So Lupin turns into a wolf, and they could have prevented this, but you know. Peter runs away because they didn't fucking knock him out. Too late, Pettigrew had transformed. Harry saw his bald tail whip through the manacle on Ron's outstretched arm, scurrying through the grass. So Harry runs to find Sirius after he was injured, and the two of them pass out as the Dementors attack, and he sees a bright flash of light. Then he wakes up in the hospital and Dumbledore turns up. Madame Pomfrey is like, can you not? But then they just push past her and Dumbledore talks to them, and Snape is also really fucking angry, but Dumbledore makes him go the fuck away. Dumbledore indicates that he definitely knew the entire time what was going on, but he just decides that children are way better to do his dirty work. Also, Lupin has proof that Sirius is innocent, but apparently they operate off of the idea that Sirius is going to get executed no matter what, and they would not wait at all for Lupin to be back to normal before they ask him, even though he has clear evidence. Like, what is this, like, Phoenix Wright shit? Dumbledore, even though he has a lot of power, decides that he doesn't have enough power to do anything, and then makes Hermione do it. Hermione explains that Time Turner, as Dumbledore tells her that she should use it, suggests that they should go back in time to save Buckbeak and save Sirius. So he knows that Buckbeak is going to get saved anyway. He just knows everything. He can see through space-time, I guess, somehow. So Hermione says, I got it from Professor McGonagall on our first day back. I've been using it all year to get my lessons. Professor McGonagall made me swear I wouldn't tell anyone. She had to write all sorts of letters to the Ministry. The fuck, McGonagall? Seriously. You clearly have this underage wizard who should not be using time travel, and various points in this scene she'll explain how horrible it is if you get fucked up in time travel, yet she decides that it's fine to just let Hermione use it. That's so irresponsible. That's so unlike her. Dumbledore says that we should just save more than one innocent life. I don't know how Dumbledore knows this, but he does. So Hermione says, nobody's supposed to change time. Nobody. You heard Dumbledore. Then why is she allowed to? You don't understand. You might attack yourself. Don't you see? Professor McGonagall told me awful things happen to wizards who are meddled with time. Loads of them end up killing their past selves by mistake. So they manage to save Buckbeak, and the Ministry people come out, and Dumbledore is like, lol, IDK, and then they just leave it at that. They don't bother doing any more searching after some cursory searching of the skies. Also, with cyclical time travel, a lot of people think that this doesn't make sense because they think that Buckbeak was killed the first time, when Buckbeak was not killed. It is just, they thought that Buckbeak was killed, but they didn't know at the time that they would go and save Buckbeak. I know this sounds stupid, but I'm just saying, like, I don't like the way that time travel is used in Harry Potter at all, but I do want to correct that because I don't want to, you know, be inaccurate when I talk about it. So, if Buckbeak had been stolen, do you really think the thief would let him away on foot? This is what Dumbledore is saying to the Ministry, and they're telling the Ministry to search the skies, because Dumbledore, even in the past, knows about time travel for some reason. Plus, Hagrid would be in serious trouble because they'd suspect Hagrid of getting someone to get Buckbeak to escape. So if anything, they can't really get out of this unless the Ministry is completely incompetent. Snape uses the cloak to go into the Whomping Willow, and they see him do this. Harry has a little bit of a tantrum seeing Snape touch the invisibility cloak, and he also thinks that whatever saved him from the Dementors when he passed out with Sirius was his dad because he's stupid. I cannot for the life of me think of a reason for why he thought that his dad was doing it when his dad's dead. Says this, and then Hermione's like, you know he's dead, right? And then Harry's like, yeah, maybe it's his ghost, and it's like, really? He realizes that he's the one who cast it the entire time, and it's super perfect and powerful. I don't know what good memory he was thinking of to even make this happen. He seems to just want to cast it purely for sake of it. And then Hermione gets mad at him and she's like, how could you do that? Now you interfered with the timeline, even though she just interfered with the timeline by getting the werewolf distracted. Sirius is then taken to the jail cell, so these guys follow him. And there's some terrible writing about him being thin to slip through the bars. Buckbeak is just chilling this entire time, and then Sirius says some bullshit and leaves with the big ass bird into the sunset, and I mean the moonlight, and no one sees them leave. Harry and Hermione jump back as the enormous wings rose once more. The hippogriff took off into the air. He and his rider became smaller and smaller as Harry gazed after them. Then a cloud drifted across the moon and they were gone. No alarms went off in the school, nothing about breaching one of the barriers. The school's very protected, but I guess they never turn any of the alarms on. So Harry and Ron run back to the corridor and the hospital wing. I'm a bit confused about why they need to be in the same place that they left when they used the time travel. And whatever. Snape is super mad that Sirius escaped because he really wanted to kill him, and then Snape gets really mad and claims that Harry is the one who did something even though he can't prove it, and then Dumbledore is like, haha, I know what's going on, and I'm not gonna tell anyone. Hermione had to give her time turner back. I don't know why she even got it in the first place, but that's the end of that plot point for the rest of the series. Lupin is also resigning because he knows that the parents will freak out about him being a werewolf, because werewolves are pretty scary even though there's basically no lore about them that fits into the world whatsoever besides like convenience. Harry is like, oh no, and then he's like, going back in time didn't do anything, and Dumbledore is like, bitch, did you read the last couple chapters? You did loads of shit, bitch. And then Dumbledore claims that Harry helped uncover the truth, even though it doesn't really do anything because the Ministry will still think that Sirius is not innocent, even though they can prove he is. Apparently Peter being saved by Harry fucks up his relationship with Voldemort because Voldemort will hate that Harry has saved his sidekick. And then Dumbledore rushes off saying that he has a lot of proposals to make about magical law enforcement, which I guess he does have the power to influence even though he didn't have the power to influence before. No one's ever really gone. Harry is on the way back home and he gets some word of Sirius via a letter and that an owl had posted into the train window. Apparently he's hiding and no one can find him. He must be in a fucking pocket dimension, I don't know. The Dementors just can't find him somehow. I guess he's a dog or something. Snape got shittier to the point where Dumbledore had to step in and tell him to not be a shit. I don't know how he's still working at the school. Go in the bin, Snape. Oh, I already said that. What's another bin thing that I can say about Snape? Go in the Tesco, Snape. So Ron still has to be taught what a fucking telephone is because the entire experience that he had still hasn't made him figure it out. Wizards are so dumb. Sirius in his letter says that he is having some fun on the run. I believe the Dementors are still searching for me, but they haven't a hope of finding me here. I'm planning to allow some muggles to glimpse me soon, a long way from Hogwarts, so that the security in the castle will be lifted. Even though Lupin is fine now, he could still present his evidence as well, yet they're not using his evidence at all, even though apparently according to Dumbledore, Lupin has key evidence to free Sirius. So Harry goes on to meet up with the Dursleys again and threatens them. He's a convicted murderer and he's broken out of wizard prison and he's on the run. He likes to keep in touch with me though, keep up on my news, check if I'm happy. Like, that's gonna work. If anything, the Dursleys would turn him into the cops and be like, this guy has some information on Sirius Black. How did this information not immediately backfire on Harry? I will never understand. As you can tell, these videos are gradually getting longer. I thought that we would be at 2 videos per book by now, but apparently not. I do know, however, that the 4th book will definitely be 2 videos because it is 800 full pages. My lord, how did I not notice that before? I have the Inheritance Cycle books and I have the last one. It's over 1,000 pages and I still haven't read it. I got that book when I was 12 years old and I still have not finished it. It's not that I'm overly intimidated by that page number because The Stand and It also have the similar type of page number and I've read both of those. I don't know why, it's just I haven't finished it yet. And I do really like the Inheritance Cycle. It's way, way, way superior to Harry Potter in every way, and it has really cool lore. We're not going to talk about the movie. Any other recommendations for fantasy are welcome. You can also recommend them in the Discord. I'm sorry that I'm not spending as much time there right now. It's just I'm busy working on the projects. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.